I heard my son ask his stepfather to be his best man instead of me, and he didn't know I was standing in the doorway. Let that sink in for a second. Because I stood there a lot longer than a second. I'll tell you that much. My name's Walter Nash. I'm 64 years old. I've lived in Tulsa my whole life, and up until about 4 months ago, I would have told you the worst thing that ever happened to me was already behind me. I would have been wrong. Let me set the scene first. My son Danny's engagement dinner, at a steakhouse downtown with the leather booths and the low lighting that makes everybody look 10 years younger and twice as rich. I sat near the end of the table, across from Danny and his fiancée Kayla's parents. Old Tulsa oil money, the Brennans, the kind of family that's had a box at the Philbrook Museum Gala since before I was born. My ex-wife Carol sat 2 seats down, laughing at something Mr. Brennan said about single malt scotch. Rick, Carol's husband, Danny's stepfather, had his arms slung over the back of her chair like he'd built the restaurant himself. Man's never worked a day of manual labor in his life, but he talks about leadership like he invented the concept. 22 years I raised that boy on my own 2 legs, well, 1.5, if we're being honest, and I'm the guy sitting at the end of the table like a spare chair nobody ordered. I got up to use the restroom, and on my way back I heard my name through the half-open door of the private room. I stopped. I know I shouldn't have listened, but something in a father's gut tells him when a conversation's about him. Dad's a good man, Danny was saying, quiet, like he'd been building up to it. But he's going to be up there in that brace, that leg dragging behind him, cane clicking on the church floor the whole way down. Every photo's going to have that in the background. Rick's steadier. Rick can actually walk beside me without everybody staring. Nobody said anything for a second. Then Carol said, soft and satisfied, "You know, I think that's the right call, honey." Rick had the decency to at least clear his throat. Kayla's mother suddenly found her wine very interesting. I stood in that hallway with my hand on the wall, because for a second my knee wanted to give out from something that wasn't even the injury. I want to tell you I walked in there and said something. Some perfect line, some gut punch of a comeback. I didn't. I've replayed that hallway, maybe 300 times since, and every time I do the same thing I did that night, I straightened my jacket. I walked back to my seat like I hadn't heard a word, and I smiled through the rest of dinner like a man who still had all his dignity intact. You raise a boy on a leg that doesn't bend right anymore, and he decides that leg's not steady enough to stand next to him on his big day. Tulsa traffic on the Gilcrease Expressway doesn't care that your heart just got run over by your own kid. I drove home with the radio off, just my thoughts and the sound of the tires. I kept looking at my hands on the wheel, then down at my leg. The way you look at something after somebody's told you it's not good enough. Like maybe this time you'd finally see what they saw. I didn't cry. I want that on the record. Walter Nash does not cry in traffic on the Gilcrease. But something sat in my chest the whole ride home, heavy and useless, all the way back to my house off Peoria Avenue in Brookside. Small place, 1 story. Wheelchair ramp I built myself out front because I refused to let a contractor do a job I could still do sitting down. I let myself in, hung my cane on the hook by the door, and stood in my kitchen not knowing what to do with my hands, which, given the conversation I'd just walked away from, felt like a cruel joke all its own. I ended up in the spare room, the one I use for storage, though storage is generous. It's a recliner, and some boxes, and a photo album I never quite finished putting together. I sat down, opened that album, and there it was, on the first page. Danny, maybe 8 years old, grinning with a gap where his front tooth used to be, sitting on my shoulders at the Tulsa State Fair, both of us laughing like idiots under the lights of the Ferris wheel. There's my boy. There's my boy before any of this. You want to know who I was before all this? I'll tell you. Every Friday night, rain or shine, I picked Danny up right after my shift ended at the rail yard. I worked as a switchman for the Santa Fe line out past Sand Springs, coupling cars, throwing the manual switches, good union work, hard on the body but honest. I'd still have my high-vis vest on, boots caked in gravel dust, and he'd come running across the yard yelling, "Dad," like I'd been gone a year instead of 10 hours. We had a routine, the Tulsa State Fair every October, no matter what. He always wanted the same thing, funnel cake, extra powdered sugar, every single year, even after he was old enough to pretend he wanted something more grown up. He'd grab my hand crossing the midway, swinging our arms like we were the only two people in Oklahoma. And right by the exit gate, I'd hoist him up onto my shoulders so he could see over the crowd for the fireworks. "Best seat in the house, Dad," he'd shout down at me, sugar dusting onto my collar. There was a guy I worked with, Otis Reams, worked the yard with me for 15 years, used to say, "Nash, that boy's gonna do something big someday. You watch." I believed him. I believed every word. Those Friday nights were the best hours of my week, better than payday, better than the Sooners covering the spread, which, let's be honest, wasn't happening often enough to be a real habit anyway. I had no idea one of those Fridays was going to be the last normal one. It was an ordinary shift. I had to run out to the north yard to reset a switch that had jammed, routine work, done it 1,000 times. Danny was with me that night because his mother had a late shift at the hospital and I didn't have anybody to watch him. He was 9. He'd been in that yard 100 times before, knew to stay behind the yellow line, knew the rules. I heard it before I understood it. A deep groan of metal. A freight car that had slipped its brakes somewhere up the grade, rolling free, picking up speed down a track that ran straight for where Danny was standing by the equipment shed, right at the edge of that yellow line. I didn't think. There wasn't a single word in my head. My body just moved. I covered that ground faster than I've covered anything in my life, and I shoved him clear, out past the rail, into the gravel, and I threw myself the other direction, except my back leg caught the edge of that moving car as it passed. It didn't kill me. It should have. It crushed everything from my hip down to my knee on the left side. 14 surgeries over 6 years. A leg that will never again bend the way legs are supposed to bend. A permanent brace, a cane I will carry for the rest of my life. I don't remember all the pain the way you'd think. I remember Otis's voice screaming my name from somewhere far away. I remember the smell of brake dust and something burning that turned out to be the sole of my boot. I remember Danny, standing in the gravel, screaming, completely unhurt, not one bruise, not one scratch. He walked away from that night without a mark on him. I didn't. Otis saw the whole thing, pulled Danny back before he even understood what was happening. Man still calls me every year on the anniversary, just to check in. Some things you don't stop caring about even when you're not the one who got hurt. I'd do it again, 1,000,000 times over. I'd do it again. That was never the question. The question, the one nobody bothered to ask me for 15 years, was what it would cost me after. You'd think a man who threw his own body into the path of a freight car for his son would earn a little grace. Carol filed for divorce 5 months later. I remember sitting across from her in a lawyer's office off Riverside, my leg still in a fixed brace, still learning how to use crutches without falling. "You shouldn't have had him out there that late, Walter," she said, flat, like she'd practiced it in a mirror, same as Danny would 15 years later. "You're reckless. I can't trust you not to put him in danger again." Reckless. I nearly laughed. I would have laughed if it didn't hurt so much to breathe deep. "Carol," I threw myself in front of "I know what you did." She cut me off sharp. "I know exactly what you did." And that was the thing. She did know. That's what made it so much worse. This wasn't ignorance. This was guilt wearing anger like a costume. Because it's easier to be furious at somebody than to sit with the fact that you weren't the one who saved your own son. She got primary custody. I got weekends, then every other weekend, then less than that, the way a river erodes a bank so slow you don't notice until half the yard's gone. And somewhere in those years, she started rewriting the story. I didn't catch it happening in real time. You never do. But looking back, I can trace it. Little comments filtered back to me secondhand. Danny, telling a coach, his dad got hurt because he wasn't paying attention. Danny at 12, asking me why I let that happen to him, to me, not what happened to you. Why did you let that happen? 15 years, Carol had that boy's ear every single day, and I had him every other weekend if the schedule cooperated. You do the math on whose version of the story was going to win. She turned proof of how much I loved that boy into evidence against me. And I didn't even see her do it. The lawsuit against the railroad took almost 4 years. Landmark case. Deferred maintenance on a brake system the company had been warned about twice in writing. I won. Won big. The kind of settlement that changes a family's whole trajectory. I never touched a dime of it. I know how that sounds. My own attorney thought I'd lost my mind. Walter, you could buy a place out in Broken Arrow with a pool. You could stop working tomorrow. And I sat there, in my same worn work boots, and said no. Because somewhere in the back of my head, Carol's voice was still there, reckless. If I spent that money on myself, wasn't that proof she was right about me? So I did the only thing that made sense to a man who'd already given his leg for his son. I put every dollar into a discretionary trust, locked, protected, managed by me alone, set to release at his milestones. 25th birthday, wedding, a house someday, if he wanted one. I kept working, couldn't do the yard anymore, so I trained into dispatch, a desk job, steady hours, nothing flashy, kept the same small house, drove a used Ford pickup with 160,000 miles on it that I maintained myself, because I refused to pay a mechanic for work. These two hands could still manage even if the leg couldn't. People probably thought I was cheap. Let them think that. Truth was, I was saving every dollar I never spent for a boy who, by then, could barely stand to look at me straight on. Carol remarried when Danny was 16. Rick Dalton, always in a quarter zip, even on a Tuesday, always talking about closing something, called himself a real estate consultant, which in my experience is what a man says when he's never actually closed on anything of his own. I didn't think much of him at first, figured he was harmless, the way a timeshare pitch is harmless. I was wrong about that too. Somewhere around Danny's early 20s, Rick started taking a real interest in his future. Not mine. He knew the trust was locked up tight, no getting past me on that. But Danny's eventual access to it started talking to him about leveraging expected assets, about positioning before the payout, smart positioning from a man who'd never had 2 nickels of his own to position anywhere. He walked Danny through paperwork one night. I know this now, pieced it together after. Paperwork that used Danny's future trust distribution as collateral against a commercial real estate deal Rick needed capital for, a deal that never quite existed the way Rick described it. Told him it was routine, told him it was safe, told him he needed to sign it to protect what was already his. Danny trusted him. He was desperate by then to look solid in front of the family he was marrying into, the Brennans, old Tulsa money, watching him like he was a stock they hadn't decided whether to buy yet. So he signed. Had no idea what he was signing away. And I had no idea at the time what Rick was building, brick by brick, lie by lie, on the foundation of a trust I'd bled for, quite literally, out on that gravel one Friday night 20 years before. I sat there on my recliner with that photo in my hand, funnel cake sugar on his chin, both of us laughing under the Ferris wheel lights. And for a second, I just let myself be in it. Let myself remember what it felt like before any of this. Before the hospital, before Carol's lawyer, before a steakhouse hallway where I heard my own son explain why my leg was a liability. I gave him everything I had left in me, and he looked right past it like it was nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light outside to go orange, then gray, then gone. My phone rang. Number I didn't recognize, Tulsa area code. I almost didn't answer. A man who throws himself in front of a train for his son for free will not fund a wedding built on a lie. That's what I decided. Sitting there with that phone buzzing in the dark. I want you to remember that line, because everything that happens next comes out of it. I answered. Mr. Nash? Hi, this is Marley. I'm the events coordinator over at the venue for your son's wedding. So sorry to bother you this late. Here we go. We're having some trouble with the final payment. The wire transfer from your attorney's office didn't clear this afternoon, and the bank flagged the funding source as blocked. The groom's mother said to call you directly, that you'd handle it. Is everything all right? I sat there on that recliner, that old photo still in my other hand. Is everything all right? I almost laughed. It came out instead as something low and tired, a sound I didn't recognize as my own voice. No, I said. Everything is not all right. Silence on her end. I could hear a printer running somewhere behind her. Cancel the booking, I said. I'm sorry, sir. Cancel it, all of it. Mr. Nash, the contract's in your name. If we cancel now, the deposit's forfeited. That's $35,000. I know. Sir, I don't think you understand. That's non-refund. I know, I said again, calmer this time, almost gentle. Cancel it anyway. And I hung up. I didn't call Danny. I didn't call Carol. I sat there in the dark with a 15-year-old photograph and let the silence do the talking for me. You want to know something? That was the first time in 15 years I felt like I had my hands on the wheel of anything. Not rage. Not revenge. Not yet. That word gets thrown around too easy, and this wasn't about revenge. Not in that moment. It was about a man finally saying no more. $35,000. Gone. Just like that. And he didn't even know it yet. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear of what I'd done. I slept fine with the decision. What kept me up was waiting. It rang the next morning at 7 to 10 while I was standing at my counter eating oatmeal, same breakfast I've had since Danny was in diapers. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice, mostly to see if my hand would shake. It didn't. Dad? What did you do? The venue called Mom, said the booking's canceled, said you told them to cancel it. Is that true? There it is. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry about what I said at dinner. Just what did you do to my wedding? It's true, I said. Why would you do that? His voice cracked, and for half a second, I felt the old pull, the instinct that ran my whole life as his father. Fix it. Make it better. Apologize even when you're not the one who did anything wrong. I didn't apologize. You said my leg couldn't keep up with you, Danny, I said. I'm just giving you a little more room up front. He went quiet. I could hear his breathing, sharp and uneven, and somewhere behind him, Carol's voice, muffled, asking what was going on. You're being cruel, he finally said. Cruel. That word landed behind my ribs and just sat there, ugly and heavy. No, son, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm being finished. I hung up before he could answer. Here's something you should know about a discretionary trust, folks. It's a legal vault. I built it to protect Danny from other people, and if I'm honest, from my own instinct to hand him everything I had. Because it's discretionary, that means I have the final say on every dollar that leaves it. It runs entirely through me. But Rick was slick. He'd convinced Danny to sign a stack of paperwork, using his future milestone payout as collateral for a commercial loan. Here's the catch. A bank won't accept a discretionary trust as collateral unless the trustee, me, signs off. Rick knew I'd say no. So he did what desperate men do. He forged my signature on the guarantee. He figured he'd use the wedding gifts and the payout timeline to clear the debt before anybody looked twice. He miscalculated. Monday morning I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Denise Okafor, and told her to freeze every wedding-related distribution. By Wednesday, the dominoes started falling. The florist, the caterer, the string quartet, all of them hit a wall, invoices bouncing back insufficient funds. I didn't stop there. I also pulled the trust backing off the bridge loan Rick and Carol were using to float their house payments in Jenks. Instead of calling to ask what was happening, Carol and Danny decided to go public. My neighbor, a woman named Fern who's lived next door for 11 years and watches everybody's business like it's a soap opera she's personally invested in, knocked on my door holding her phone like a live wire. Carol had gone full production, ring light, kitchen island, tears right on cue, tagged a couple of Tulsa community pages and the Brennan family's business account, dabbing her eyes, saying my son's father is holding his wedding hostage out of pure jealousy because another man is standing beside him. He's bitter and he's controlling. She even pinned a comment at the top. The Brennans have lawyers everywhere. We'll see him in court. The internet did what it always does. Hundreds of strangers calling me a monster. But Carol made a fatal mistake. By tagging the Brennans' public business page, she dragged a messy, low-rent internet brawl straight to the doorstep of a family that survives on quiet respectability. She thought she was weaponizing them against me. Instead, she guaranteed they'd cut her and Danny loose the second it got embarrassing. And then the trap snapped shut. When the automated bridge loan payment on the Jenks house bounced that Tuesday, it triggered a flag in the bank's compliance department. A human auditor actually pulled the file to see why a trust of that size had missed a scheduled payment. They looked at Rick's commercial loan file. They looked at the signature on the collateral guarantee. Then they called Denise to verify it. She took one look at the forged document and told them the truth. Walter Nash never signed this. By Wednesday afternoon, it wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a federal bank fraud investigation. The bank froze Rick's accounts and called his entire commercial loan due immediately. At the same time, Denise enforced the penalty clauses on the house bridge loan. Their mortgage payment more than doubled overnight, 30 days to pay or vacate. Rick Dalton, real estate consultant, staring down a federal loan default and eviction from a house he never should have been able to afford in the first place, sitting next to a wife who'd just torched her ex-husband's name on the internet for a wedding that no longer had a venue. I won't lie, there was a small, ugly, human part of me that felt something close to satisfaction sitting in that. But mostly, I just felt tired. I want you to understand something about this stretch of time. It's easy to make it sound like I was some mastermind in a dark room pulling strings with an evil grin. That's not what it was. Mostly it was quiet. I went to work at Dispatch out past Sand Springs, same as always. Clocked in, did my job, kept my head down, came home. I stopped by a little diner on Peoria a couple nights that week, sat alone at the counter with chicken fried steak, because some things a man does just to remember what normal feels like. I didn't check Facebook. Fern did that for me, God bless her, showing up every couple days with updates I never asked for but somehow needed to hear anyway. They deleted the second video, she told me on a Friday. The one calling out the Brennans by name. She looked at me the way people look at you when they're trying to figure out if you're all right. You okay, Walter? Was I okay? I thought about that steakhouse hallway, about my son's voice explaining to a room full of strangers why my leg wasn't steady enough, about 22 years of Friday nights, funnel cake, a boy on my shoulders yelling best seat in the house to a Ferris wheel full of lights that believed it just as much as I did. I will be, I told Fern, and for the first time in a long while, I actually believed it. My phone buzzed on the counter one evening. Text message. No name attached. Just a number I recognized as Carol's sister. Somebody who hadn't spoken to me directly in almost a decade. Walter, you need to see this. Call me. I stared at that message a long moment. Whatever this was, I thought, it wasn't going to be good news. That call, from a woman named Renata I hadn't heard from since maybe 2016, was the first domino I didn't push myself. That one fell on its own. Walter, it's Renata, she said when I called back, voice tight. I probably shouldn't be calling you. Carol would kill me. But somebody needs to. Renata, what's going on? Rick's gone. Nobody knows where. The second the auditors flagged that forged signature and froze his accounts, he packed a bag that same night and left. Didn't say a word to Carol. She woke up to an empty closet and federal investigators serving a warrant on her front lawn. I looked down at my own hand wrapped around the phone. And the house? I asked, already knowing. Notice of default came Thursday, 30 days before foreclosure starts. This leg paid for that house, one settlement dollar at a time. And the man who told my son I wasn't steady enough to stand beside him ran the second things got hard. I heard about the rest through Fern, same as everything else that month. The Brennans found out about the fraud investigation the same week. Small city, remember, everybody's one phone call from everybody else. A stepfather under federal scrutiny, a smear campaign gone sideways and looking less like righteous outrage and more like a family imploding in public, a canceled venue, a frozen trust that had clearly been propping up their whole lifestyle. None of that plays well with people who care that much about how things look. Kayla's family decided the risk to their name wasn't worth it. A clean public statement wishing the young man well, never once mentioning fraud or trust funds or lawsuits. The wedding was off. Just like that. $85,000 of wedding gone. Fiancé gone. Stepfather gone. House about to be gone. And every one of those things had my name quietly holding it up the whole time, until I stopped holding it up. I won't pretend I didn't feel something when I heard. But it wasn't joy, and it wasn't really satisfaction either. It was something quieter and heavier than that. Like watching a house of cards fall down that I'd built the foundation for and never once got thanked for building. It was a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after that steakhouse dinner, when I heard the knock on my door. I knew before I opened it. Some part of you always knows. Carol and Danny stood in my driveway, looking about as far from that steakhouse booth as two people could get. Carol's hair was pulled back messy instead of styled, makeup smudged. Danny looked like he hadn't slept in a week, hollow around the eyes, hands shaking slightly at his sides. The hands that used to hold mine crossing the midway at the fair. Now they were the ones shaking. Dad, Carol's voice cracked on the word. Can we come in? A month ago, she called me a jealous bully on the internet in front of thousands of strangers. Now she was standing on my ramp asking permission. I stepped back and let them in. Not because I owed them anything, but because whatever I was about to say, I wanted to say it sitting down, and I wanted them to have to look me in the eye while I did. They sat on my couch. I sat across from them in my recliner, the one with the leg rest, and I waited. I'd waited 15 years for this conversation. I could wait another minute. Danny broke first. He slid off the couch onto his knees on my living room floor. And I want to tell you that didn't do something to me, watching my own son kneel in front of me, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't. Dad, please. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, son. Go on. The venue's gone. The house. We're going to lose the house. Rick's gone, Dad. He just left. Didn't even say goodbye, and I don't. He pressed his shaking hands against his face. The feds came to the house. They said he forged your name, used my future to commit bank fraud, and now everything's gone. Please, just release the trust, please. Carol was crying now too, quiet and controlled, the practiced kind that had worked on plenty of people before me. Walter, we're begging you. We have nowhere else to go. You have nowhere else to go. 20 years ago I had a leg they had to rebuild 14 separate times and nowhere else to go either. Nobody knelt on my floor for me. I didn't say any of that yet. I let the silence sit there, heavy, while Danny cried on my carpet. And then he said it, the thing I didn't see coming, even after everything. I remember the fair, he said, barely above a whisper, looking up at me with eyes that for 1 second looked like the 8-year-old on my shoulders under the Ferris wheel lights. I remember the funnel cake. I remember. He stopped. Come on, say it. Finish the sentence. His mouth opened, closed. Something moved behind his eyes. Something old, buried under 15 years of his mother's careful reconstruction. For 1 full second I thought he was finally going to say it. I remember what happened in that rail yard. I remember what you gave up for me. He didn't say it. He looked down at the carpet instead, and whatever had almost surfaced went back under. He knows. Somewhere in there, underneath everything his mother built, he knows exactly what this leg cost, and he still can't bring himself to say it out loud, even now, even on his knees. That's the moment something in me finally closed all the way. I stood up, slow, unhurried, the way you stand when you've made peace with a decision instead of reacting to one. I walked over to the little table by my window, the one with 2 chairs where I eat breakfast alone most mornings, and I sat down. I looked at both of them, still on my couch and my floor, and I waited until Danny lifted his head to look at me. Then I reached down, unlatched the brace at my knee, and set my cane flat on the table in front of him, right there in plain sight where nobody could look away from it. You said this leg couldn't stand beside you at your own wedding, I said. My voice didn't shake. I want that on the record. It didn't shake at all. But this leg is the only reason you had a wedding to plan in the first place. Danny made a sound like the air had been knocked clean out of him. I saved you once, son, I said. I won't save you again. Nobody moved. Carol had gone completely pale, hand pressed over her mouth. Danny just knelt there, staring at that cane on the table like he was seeing it, really seeing it, for the first time in his whole life. 22 years of Friday nights, a settlement I never spent a dime of, and it took him kneeling on the wreckage of everything I built for him to finally look at that leg and understand what it actually meant. Too late, son. Too late. I stood up. I walked past both of them, past the couch, past 22 years of a life I'd given everything to build, and I went to the window. Tulsa was doing its evening thing out there. Streetlights flickering on along Peoria. Somebody's dog barking a couple houses down. Ordinary life going on. Ordinary and indifferent to what had just happened in my living room. I heard Carol behind me, voice breaking. Walter, please, we have nowhere. I didn't turn around. I reached up and closed the curtain. I heard them sit there a moment longer. The particular silence of 2 people realizing there's nothing left to say that's going to change anything. Then the couch creaked. Footsteps. The door opening and closing. Quiet. None of the drama of that steakhouse hallway. None of the videos and ring lights and accusations. Just quiet. I didn't watch them leave. I stood at that closed curtain a long time, my hand resting on the sill, weight off my bad leg, and I let the house go silent around me. I'll give you the rest quick, because you've earned the ending. And I don't believe in dragging out good news any more than bad. Carol and Danny were out of the Jenks house within the month. Unbacked bridge loan, not a standard mortgage. So the bank moved fast, quiet, and unglamorous. None of the internet fanfare that came with the accusations. Last I heard, through Renata, they'd moved into a small rental over in Sand Springs. Modest, unremarkable. The kind of place I'd lived most of my adult life while they were living in a colonial with a 3-car garage. Rick never resurfaced in Tulsa. Word got around, same small city grapevine that told me everything else, that the fraud investigation turned into actual federal charges, wire fraud, false collateral representation, the whole ugly list. Last anybody heard, he was somewhere down in Texas, living considerably smaller than the least Lexus days, waiting on a court date he couldn't talk his way out of. The Brennans never spoke to Danny again. Not one call, not one message, just a clean, well-lawyered silence, the kind families like that are very good at. As for the trust, I never released it. Not the wedding money, not the house money, none of it. Denise restructured the whole thing, locked it down tighter than before, redirected the untouched principal into a scholarship fund at the technical college out in Sand Springs, for kids going into trades, the kind of work that builds something real with your hands. The kind of work I always figured Danny might have respected me for, if his mother had let him. What's left waiting on his milestone? If there ever comes a day he earns his own way back to it, sits there and waits, that's not up to me anymore. That's up to him. As for me, I still live in that same house off Peoria. Still drive that same Ford. Still work the same desk out past Sand Springs. Still stop into that diner some nights, alone at the counter, same as always. Otis still calls me every year, right around the anniversary. Last time we talked, he said something that stuck with me. You did good, Nash, he said. Not the wedding thing. The other thing. 20 years ago, you did good. I know, Otis. I've always known. It just took the rest of the world a while to catch up. Some Fridays, when the weather's right, I still drive out to the fairgrounds when the fair's in town. I still buy a funnel cake, even though I never once liked funnel cake. Never did, not really. I just liked watching him eat it. I sit on a bench near the Ferris wheel now, alone, and I look down at this leg, stiff and scarred and useless in the way legs aren't supposed to be, and I think about an 8-year-old boy on my shoulders yelling best seat in the house to a whole midway of strangers who believed him completely. I'd still do it again. 1,000,000 times over, I'd still do it again. That was never the question. It was never going to be the question. The question was whether he'd ever be brave enough to say thank you. He wasn't. Not yet, anyway. But this leg, it's done, waiting around for it. Sometimes the people we save don't remember to thank us until it's too late, but that doesn't undo the saving. What you give out of love was never alone waiting to be repaid. It stands on its own, whole and worth it, even if no one ever hands you the gratitude you deserved. Keep loving loudly, anyway. Someone, someday, will finally see it. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hoping to share a genuine, positive life lesson with you.